Okay, welcome guys. It is February 27th. We are here today to have a wonderful, informative, and educational town hall with Austin Dragon. My name is Catherine Rahimian. I am the chair of Moms for Liberty in Orange County. And Michelle, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Michelle O'Brien, and I'm the vice chair.
And Austin, we'll throw it to you. Please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're running for.
I am running for the mayor of Los Angeles, and I am actually a 30-year resident of Los Angeles, originally from New York. And I'm running for, for the simple reason that I'm fed up with a lot of, I feel that why should we, the normal average people, have to leave Los Angeles? Let's kind of get the bums out and let's get some average people elected to office. That's what we need to do, from local straight on up. That's what we need to get for us to turn things around. That's what we need to do. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So here at Moms for Liberty, we believe in holding all levels of government accountable. So we have this idea sometimes that focusing on school boards is the only thing that we can do. What we really like people to know is that we can bring a parental rights perspective and an education focused perspective to all government offices. And we're going to be really excited to hear how you think, as LA mayor, that position can have an influence on education. So we're really excited. And if you would like to screen share, we can go ahead and start digging into the numbers because we want data. We love data.
Absolutely. So let me get this set up and let's see. Okay, let me share the screen. I think I got it.
Well, we're really excited. We were talking with Austin a few minutes ago about a huge turnout they had at a rally in Hollywood today. The LA parents are very fired up. There's actually a lot of different LA parent groups right now pushing back. And that's what we're very hopeful for in California, is that people across the spectrum, outside of any labels or boxes or affiliations, are starting to recognize the importance of parents being involved in education and in fixing a lot of the issues that are currently going on. So yeah, let's start diving in. I love your title here, Parent Power. That's what we're here for.
Absolutely. And that's really a kind of a key phrase, because parents are turning out to be the new sleeping giant in politics, whether it's in Virginia or even here even in San Francisco, we're seeing parent power. So let me just go through the presentation here and I'll cover all those things. I didn't want to kind of steal the thunder in terms of the bio, so I just give a little bit more information. I'm not going to read all of this, but just to give you the highlights. I'm originally, again, from New York. I also was in the U.S. Army, and I served in upstate New York at Fort Drum. Yeah, I moved here 30 years ago. I can't even believe it. I've actually lived here in Los Angeles longer than my birth state. So I was born in Brooklyn, grew up in Long Island, served for 3 years upstate New York. After that, since I didn't get to travel, I actually started college in Paris, France. And I lived there an entire year and I actually learned the language. Once in fact, I recommend everyone, before they, quote, start life, that they should do some type of traveling. I highly recommend it, preferably a country where you don't speak the language. After that, I decided, since I suffered so much from the cold, I used to like the winter as a kid. So if any of you have ever been in upstate New York, 2 hours south of the Canadian border, I went through my first minus 40 degrees. After that, I had no tolerance, even to this day, no tolerance for cold. So my choices were Florida, been there, too humid, Hawaii off the mainland. So I moved to California. And back then, California was an amazing, beautiful place. It still is a great city, but it's not the same beautiful place that it was. Conducive to small business and middle class. So moved here. I started a career as a corporate recruiter, and I've done that for over 20 years, hiring everything from clerical to C-suite, CEOs, CIOs, etc. I also dabbled. I ran once before 20 years ago. I ran for school board of Los Angeles. I ended up working for the person who did win, who was the president of the board. I was her chief deputy. I left after 13 months because I knew nothing was going to change. And I saw for myself how people don't realize, even when you have good elected people, it is still the bureaucracy many times that is running the show. So that's kind of the overview of myself. So in terms of my overall campaign platform, there really, here are some of the points. The number one really is the explosion of crime, which I'm sure all around the country people are seeing that. I consider that to be the number one issue because that's really what government's for. It's supposed to protect people, their property. That's the number one role. Right after that, and it's actually linked, is the homelessness crisis. So that is, there are parts of LA that are literally unrecognizable. It's not just a third world, it's worse than a third world. We mentioned that I was at an event in Hollywood, great event. There were people there and there were homeless people shooting drugs right there on the street. And she looked at me, it's like, is that normal? Yes, it's normal, but no, it shouldn't be normal. That's the other piece of it. The other is ending city hall corruption. Los Angeles is not a poor city. California is not a poor state. So why is it that we can't seem to solve our problems? Where is all of this money going? And that's kind of the heart of the corruption. We've had at least 3 city council people recently indicted, 2 Democrats, 1 Republican. So you can see it's a bipartisan corruption. And the other point, as far as my platform, is bringing back businesses and jobs and helping those that are struggling. But a piece of that is also public education, because if you don't have an educated workforce, why would you, with all of the nonsense here in Los Angeles, why would you move to Los Angeles for a new business? So let's go to the next thing. Now let's talk more about education, because again, I really think parent power is going to be critical to my campaign. And here's a quote here, and I guess a kind of a informal poll for the audience is, when was this quote from? The educational foundations of our society are presently being eroded by a rising tide of mediocrity. If an unfriendly foreign power had attempted to impose on America the mediocre educational performance that exists today, we might well have viewed it as an act of war. Can anyone tell me what year this was said? For our audience that is on mute. This is from 1983, and what many people don't realize is that the, quote, modern educational reform movement started during the Reagan years. So we're talking about nearly 40 years ago, this effort started, and it has been a failure. We've had some notable kind of blips that we can say are successes, but overall, is the public educational system, and I'm speaking of Los Angeles, has it really changed? I mean, I ran 20 years ago. I wish it was as bad as it was back then. It is far worse, and it's getting much, and we keep spiraling downward and downward, and you think, okay, we've hit bottom, and then it goes down even further. And 1983, 84 is when I became politically aware, and that's when I got interested. How do you improve education? That's how I got interested in politics. So let's look at the state of affairs. And I like this quote because this is the other aspect of education, not just the academics, but we're really supposed to be equipping young people to be those productive citizens of this country. And as we know, it's easier to build strong children than prepare broken men. This is a quote from Frederick Douglass, abolitionist, civil rights icon. And that's a lot of the problems that we have in our society can be, tied back to education. If we get that right, that solves a lot of the other issues that we're dealing with as a society. I mentioned when I ran for school board 20 years ago, this is how bad it was. And I'm not going to read all of this, but let me just highlight the top in red. At the time I ran, only 30% of LA Unified students perform proficient in English language arts, only 30%, and only 30% were proficient in math. In middle school, 58% of the children were not proficient in grade level English. And in high school,
In 99?
that's back in 1999.
Wow.
And
Just
high
one
school,
question, one of
go ahead.
one of the attendees has asked if you would be able to make that PowerPoint available after the meeting, because I think a lot of people would really like to have these stats handy.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Great, thank you.
And the other thing, the other point I'd like to highlight is a lot of people, including Californians, don't realize that half of the state budget goes to education. So this is another reason why are we near the bottom in terms of educational performance. So these are all the questions that you're asked. And I have this quote from back then. This was a supporter and her child. I hate school. Why won't anyone help us? And your heart breaks because why are we in this position with all of this? These people have a lot of power, and they're not exercising that. They're dealing, they're fixated on their ideology that's detached from reality. They don't listen to the community. They don't listen to parents. As we know, recently, parents are now being called domestic terrorists, but I digress. So here's another kind of stats, and I'll only highlight the top one and the last one. Again, California spends half its budget on education. However, in the last bullet point, in the last 50 years, there has been a 700% increase in administrative positions. Just think about that. So let me give you another real world stat. So when I ran and I worked for LA Unified back in 99, and I worked for LA Unified for 13 months in 2000, the student population in Los Angeles was north of 750,000. Now it is dipping below 400,000. So just to give you some sense of how much the school district, the second largest school district in the nation, has shrunk. Has the administration shrunk? No, it has not. So just think about that. Here are just some articles, just to give you the headlines. Lawyers suing LA Unified because children can't read. And keep in mind, again, this is a bipartisan thing. The organization that sued them is on the left. So this is left, right, and center in terms of recognizing the crisis that we have in education. The highlight here, 42% of Los Angeles Unified School Districts earned a D or F in English arts. 50% earned a D or F in math. And just, I don't know if any of you saw the recent kind of proposal, not proposal, but what they're going to be doing in terms of LA Unified is they're going to be graduating kids that have Ds and Fs. So they're no longer hiding the fact that social promotion was going on. They say, oh, if they have a D or F, we're still going to promote them. So I already mentioned this. Yes, go ahead.
Real quick. Michelle in the chat has a question. How is it that we have all of these California distinguished schools? So how are those titles given, and how is it that they're proclaiming everything is great, but the data doesn't really back that up?
So for the California distinguished schools, some of them may in fact be accurate. And as we know, it's not just, private schools, but also public schools. We have great public schools. We have great charter schools, and we have the reverse, bad charter schools, bad public schools, so forth. For some of them, it is legitimate. And that is a function of the leadership of the school and also the parents really holding the leadership of that school accountable. So I would say those are the exception rather than the rule. What is happening, as we know, with any kind of bureaucracy, it is like everyone's just followers and just everyone's clock watchers. And if you don't have those active parents who can really be there at the meetings, who can really demand that change is made and just keep an eye out on everything that's happening, nothing changes. So yes, there are absolutely distinguished schools, but the other thing is you have to be careful is you always have to look at the data yourself. So I don't know if some people are realizing that US News and World Report does the best colleges. I don't know if many parents realize those colleges are paying to be in that report. So there's all kinds of rackets going on. So just look at the numbers, look at the data yourself, and make your determination from there. So let's go to the next one. Now, of course, um, COVID has been a disaster in so many ways, but it also has really opened a lot of parents' eyes, again, across the political spectrum, and we should be thankful for that. So here in Los Angeles, we had kids who were literally out of school for 18 months. I sit on the board of 2 charter schools and an after-school academy. We did assessments and the kids were anywhere from 3 to 5 years grades behind as a result of being out of school for 2 years, basically 2 years. It also, the schools that I sit on the board of, they're South LA, so economically low income parents, and the hardship was significant. If their kids are not in school, they can't go to work. It's just that simple. Massive learning loss. Parents saw really how fringe of an organization UTLA is, because UTLA said, "Oh, there's no learning loss. It's all made up." What are you talking about? These kids are, they're so many years behind. And the other thing that has been very distressing to me, with the media ignoring, is the rise in depression and suicide. That to me is a scandal. They're not covering those numbers at all. So these elected officials are fixated on the mask and these mandates, but it's starting to crumble. We see that slowly but surely, even though there's no justification for it right now. And a lot of people who are kind of in the Los Angeles bubble don't realize that most of the country is not doing this. There's just a couple, a few places. You go, even Orange County, you could get in your car in LA, drive down to Orange County. They're not doing this. So COVID is only hovering around above Los Angeles or New York City or DC. What are you talking about? So, yeah. So, yeah, this is it's just very crazy. So I mentioned, and here's some other articles. I already mentioned one, which is to me very disturbing, how political things have gotten, with the Attorney General literally targeting parent groups. He lied about it, and then we found out that it was being directed as high as the level of White House. And again, this is very disturbing what's going on. Here in California, they have some bills being proposed where a child can be vaccinated without their parents' approval or even knowledge. What are you?
Right?
Yeah, it's coming up. What are you guys doing? Another article I have there posted, the LA school, a school called the police on unvaccinated teens, not criminals, not gang members, but on unvaccinated teens. This is just insane what is going on. But again, it's coming to an end, because now they're seeing, particularly in San Francisco, they recall 3 board members. So now these crazies are saying, "Oh, okay, it's not just right wingers; it's everybody. It's all parents that are upset with us." So now they're starting to take a different tone, and that brings us to this slide here. Parents are required to send their children to school from 6 to 17, but the school is not required to educate your children. There are no consequences. That's what we have to change. There has to be consequences for them not doing their job. These children are not being prepared for the world of work or the world of higher education. And that's another kind of scandal that the media doesn't cover. How many kids, this kind of push, go to college, go to college, go to college, how many of them drop out? What happens with those dropouts? Again, it's all being ignored. I think if you're going to certain professions, yes, go to college. But, as a corporate recruiter for 20 years, someone has a degree in basket weaving. I mean, what exactly are you going to do with that degree? And I'm being somewhat facetious, but as you know, there's a lot of degrees. It's like, what are you talking about? What is that? What are you going to do with that? So again, we know that the tide is turning. We have last year we had Glenn Youngkin, who defeated Terry McAuliffe to become the governor of Virginia. The other is that I always love this one, the truck driver who beat the longtime Senate leader in New Jersey, and he only spent $153. He's a trucker. Go truckers! I so love that one. And then, as I already mentioned, 3 school board members, they have been recalled. So all of this we're seeing, again, left, right, and center, is because of parent power. And it even started before that, because many people don't realize Ron DeSantis, he got elected because 100,000 Democratic voters switched and voted for him rather than Gillum over the issue of education. It was really that Gillum was going to cut back on the very popular scholarships in Florida, school choice and all of that. And there were inner city parents, moms, who said, nope, that's not going to work for us. And that's how DeSantis, 100,000 votes switched. So this has been going on. So for my race, that's why it is such an important thing, because we're really putting together a broad coalitions, and that's what it's going to take. And I'm going to really focus on that. And one of the questions that I get a lot of, well, the mayor doesn't directly have anything to do with schools in Los Angeles, and that's true. So let me address that. What is very disturbing, again, having been a recruiter for over 20 years, is that some of these kids know that they've been cheated, but there's a lot of them who don't know they've been cheated. And that's very sad. Los Angeles, even with all of the madness, is still a center in technology and venture capitalism, all of that. But these kids, because they are not being given the opportunity to acquire these skills, they'll never be a part of this economy, never. So here's another kind of, I guess, poll for all of our audience on mute. So the budget for City of LA is $11 billion. Does anyone know what the budget is for the Los Angeles School District? And of course, I'll give you the answer since you can't answer me. Most people have no idea. The budget for LA Unified is double that of the city of Los Angeles. And keep in mind, City of LA is the second largest in the country. And of course, the next question is, where is all of that money going? They cannot educate children properly, and this has been a problem that's been going on for decades. That's how huge the bureaucracy and the institution of the Los Angeles School District is.
And it's frustrating that narrative is so powerfully controlled that we need to spend more money. If
Right.
we just had more money, we're just underfunded.
Correct.
And so people truly believe that narrative. And when you show them a statistic like that, they're going to be shocked. I mean, when you first
Exactly.
said that to me, I was shocked. It's incredible to me how much even I kind of believed that maybe it was a funding issue. But it's definitely something we have to dive into and see where is all that going, because we're not getting results.
No, we haven't for 50 years. That's the other disturbing thing. This is kind of the never-ending story. The other thing that many voters don't know is inner city communities, inner city schools actually get more money. That's the other thing. And that's what I found out when I actually worked for LA Unified. I'm like, whoa, look at all this extra because of the low income, school lunches, all of that. There's all of these different programs where they're actually getting more money, but they're still not able to perform. It's always, like you said, they always use this canard that, oh, we don't have enough funding. Yes, you do. So the problem we have is, I always like this quote, it's attributed to Albert Einstein. We're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So that's why I want to do something different. So let me just skip to this part in the interest in time. So to answer that question about what can the mayor of Los Angeles do in terms of schools? So there are two models that I can follow. The first is Richard Riordan, and that's when, and I have the dates when he was the mayor of Los Angeles. he put together a coalition to take over LA Unified. And this was back in 99. And I wasn't directly part of it, but I was involved because I was one of the candidates running for office. They were successful. He worked with the billionaire Eli Broad, and they won. They took over LA Unified. They had 4 seats. I was part of that. I was so happy. I said, finally, we're going to get the change. And like I said, after 13 months, I left because I knew nothing was going to change. The bureaucracy and the unions were running the show. So that's one model. We put together slates of candidates, and that's still talked about. The other model, and this is the one actually I'm going to follow, is the Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. He actually took over some low performing schools. It was actually 19. Now, it was more show than substance, but that would be the model that I would follow. I would basically say to the Los Angeles Unified School District, you are violating the civil rights, the educational rights of these communities, of these kids. This is the never-ending story. You have not, you're being sued because kids can't read. You're denying learning loss that has happened with kids being behind 3, 4, 5, 6 years. You're not changing. You never will. You have more money than you've ever had, particularly now with COVID. They're getting even more money. So enough is enough. So I would basically petition and work with the community and say, we're going to take over these schools. And that would be that's how I would be directly involved in public schools. Because again, I'm not going to be able, as the executive of the city, to bring new businesses, to keep struggling businesses, unless we do something about the workforce. And schools is at the center of that. So, as we all know, and I mentioned those numbers about people are voting with their feet, the massive decline in again, Los Angeles being as beautiful as it is, to lose that many students. We're losing population. California is now losing a congressional seat because so many people are leaving. So parents are right to say, hey, I'm not getting any results, so I'm leaving, but I want to be able to say, just hold on. We can definitely turn the ship around. And, I've been connected with the ed reform movement for a long time. I recognize that parents are, the new sleeping giant on the political field. And we need someone who can frame it in that way. It is, these communities and these kids, their civil rights are being violated. All parents, and it's not a racial thing. That's the other thing that annoys me. This is across the board. This is unacceptable for a city and a state as rich as it is. So that is basically, I guess that concludes my kind of overview, my presentation. So I definitely, let's make history together, and let's do this. And I probably should change something on this slide because there's something I know, but I'll say it. I'm running as an independent. That's the other thing. They're basically grooming one particular candidate for this seat, another lifelong career politician who you ask anyone in the street, what has she done? And no one can answer your question. So I think this is our time for independent. Let's get some independent, average, normal people. I mean, why do we even have to say that? I mean, that's how strange things are, that just a normal person, that's what we need. So that's the end of my presentation. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the audience has.
Awesome. Thank you, Austin.
I do have.
Yeah, Michelle has some questions for you.
Sure.
Hi, Austin. First and foremost, thank you for your service and your sacrifices in the military. Our nation appreciates you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And so my question pertains to, there's a significant homeless population in the city of Los Angeles. Within that population are quite a few students, kids. What, if anything, do you see how you can help these families, these children, to feel more comfortable and get us a better education? Because so many of them, if maybe they're in hotel rooms and they're with their whole family, and when they were learning remotely, they weren't able to concentrate on education and
Of
therefore
course.
falling behind. So
Right.
I'd be curious to know, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the first thing is that we have to have a vision. What kind of city do we want? And for me, the starting point is that we have to say as a city, we will not allow anyone to live, and also the sad part of that, die on the streets. We have to, that has to be the starting point. That there will be no encampments, there will be no one dying, no one freezing to death. The other thing that many people don't know also about the homeless population is they're being preyed on by gang members as well. That's the other thing. That's a whole other kind of conversation. But that's what we have to have the vision. The second part of that is the word homeless. I hate that word, because what we're doing is we're putting different groups in the same bucket, and there are different strategies. There's mental illness. They need care. We have drug abuse. They need treatment. Then there are others who are there on the street for whatever reason. That could be counseling. We need to basically triage the population out there so that we can provide the proper services for them. The other part is the city is really focused on permanent housing. That is a mistake, because it means, so we in Los Angeles passed, I didn't vote for it because I knew it would be wasted, but LA voters passed Proposition Triple H, which gave the city hall $1.2 billion to build housing for the homeless. They said they would build 10,000 units. It's 5 years later, and you know how many units they built? Less than 1,000. That's it. So this, again, permanent housing is what they're prioritizing. But if this is how long it's going to take, and each one of those units, just so you know, they're spending $550,000 to $1 million per unit, just to give you an idea. So according to them, out of that $1.2 billion, there's only $300 million left. Again, this is, yeah, that's the look of LA voters. So this is the madness that's going on. So what I would say is that forget the permanent housing, because that is a longer term fix. We have to do temporary housing and immediately get people off the streets, out of the parks, off the beaches. These encampments under bridge underpasses goes away. That has to be a priority. The city of Los Angeles has a lot of empty commercial real estate that can be repurposed quite quickly. The auditor of Los Angeles has also identified space near LAX. So we have the space to put these units. So that has to be the priority. Let's temporary housing, and we're going to enforce the laws that you are not allowed to live on the street. And then once we have that taken care of, and we can start looking at, okay, what kind of permanent housing, what kind of real long-term care, because if it's mental illness, what really the city is doing is has people who are unable to care for themselves wandering around on the streets. That in itself should be a crime. So you mentioned also families, there are a lot of kids living. So again, they need to be in care now, not in some distant parallel universe, because the city has shown it has no ability to even do something as simple as build a unit of housing that's cost effective to get people off the street.
On a related note, somebody has a question. Mr. Dragon, are you familiar with the Orange County Rescue Mission founded by Jim Palmer? Do you see a model like that working in LA to address the homeless population?
It's funny you mentioned that. I was there, spent time, that was last month I was there, and actually I will be meeting with him. His program is excellent. One of the things for his program is they have to follow rules. And if they don't want to follow rules, they're not allowed to be in that facility. So we need a different kind of approach. That's great for those who are ready. But what about those who say, you know what, I'm not going to follow rules? Well, they can't be allowed to live on the street either. So we need to have a different program for that. But absolutely, I think his program should be expanded far and wide for those who are ready. But would that only solves a piece of the problem, because a lot of these homeless individuals, the issue that I keep hearing over and over again is they live on the street because they won't come into shelter because they have to follow rules and they don't want to do it.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's smart to address the different reasons that you're dealing with it. It's like you said, it's not all one conglomerate reason that everybody has
Yeah,
a different strategy that's going to be best.
absolutely. And another piece of it that I think we all recognize as well is other states are sending their homeless here. That's
Right.
another, so
Yes.
that's a whole other kind of, so that's another issue we have to deal with.
Okay, we have another question. Oh, well, I have a comment here as well. They were speaking to some of the statistics you posted earlier, said if anyone is interested on reading up further on everything Mr. Dragon has said about public education, specifically the funding games that are played and the growing size of administration while enrollment is decreasing. I recommend the book Inside American Education by Thomas Sowell. It corroborates everything that has been shared in this presentation. So yeah, I also recommend that book. We read that as one of our book of the month, and it was extremely interesting. And to your point, some of the things that the book was written in 1993, and you would read some of that and think it was written this year, talking about how they would rename programs that weren't popular, how they would shuffle around teachers that they couldn't fire. And that brings me to another question we had submitted. What can be done to limit the grip the California Teachers Association has on California, especially as you are a charter school board member and the CTA is well known to be against charter schools? How do we get ourselves out from under the thumb of the CTA?
Sadly, the only way to do it is we need school choice. So however we do it, that has to be the ultimate goal. The CTA and here in Los Angeles, UTLA, they have too much power. And as we have seen with our own eyes, we even have the elected officials not following, quote, the science. They're following, I mean, here in Los Angeles, the shutdown had nothing to do with CDC. It had to do with UTLA. They were the ones responsible for it. So, I mean, that's very disturbing. So, again, I left when I worked for the school board president, and back then, again, I saw for myself the power of the unions. Just as a little story, one of the board members did not vote the way they wanted. The next day, that board member's house was broken into. So just to give you an idea, this is what we're dealing with. So to answer the question, we're not going to solve it until every parent has the power to pull their child out of school and they themselves and direct where their child goes. Anything short of that is not going to fix it. We can, maybe we can get a courageous slate of candidates that are fearless and get them elected. That's great, but that's not, to me, a permanent fix. When the money follows the child and the parent is in charge, that's a permanent fix. Anything else, we're just putting band-aids on the problem.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, I'll give a shout out to Michelle for doing school choice signatures. She's been a powerhouse here in Orange County. I know Los Angeles is going to have, I think, 50 signing locations this weekend, trying to collect signatures, because that is one of the ways we can directly affect being able to choose the schools, is just getting it on the ballot and pushing it. Even if it doesn't pass, in my opinion, it's a very important thing to get on the ballot, because it starts a discussion that they don't want to have. And it allows us to be in the media answering why we support this. And it's something that is, they're not really wanting to publicize this movement yet, but Michelle's been working really hard to collect those school choice signatures. And anyone who's attending today or is watching the playback of this video, I definitely encourage, if you haven't signed it, find out how to sign it and then grab a petition yourself and get others to sign it as well, because what is the deadline for that?
It's going to be, I believe, the third week in March. Last I heard, And I say the third week in March because the cutoff is about a week, 10 days after that, but they have to be sent to the Registrar of Voters, Secretary of State, and then so forth. And last I heard, we needed a little over 700,000 more signatures on this.
Oh, wow.
Being there's a minimum of 1 million signatures required, but if any of the ink on a signature goes below the line, the signature line, they disqualify that. If somebody abbreviates avenue on their street, they're disqualified. They're going to nitpick every reason they can to reduce as many signatures.
Which they're not supposed to do, but yes, that's what they do. Yeah.
Right.
We have another audience question here. What is the current best watchdog group that is tracking government spending in LA or in Orange County?
There are a lot of groups. I mean, that's another issue. We have so many different ones. There's Transparent California, where you can actually see salaries, and that's always very eye-opening how much money people are actually making for sometimes doing nothing. We also have some good media sources, Epoch Times, I'm sure everyone's familiar with, California Globe. There's also Truth in Accounting. I think they cover more the cities rather than the school, but that's another watchdog group. Again, that's part of the problem. There's so many different groups, but I can always put together a list and I can get that to you. You can and send that out to the group. But
Yeah, we would appreciate that. I know that's something you mentioned, how COVID has increased the funding for the schools as well.
Yes, dramatically.
So we're starting to go to the individual school boards and say, okay, you received $35–40 million in ESSER 3 funds.
Correct.
Intended to upgrade the ventilation or be somehow related to COVID prevention. And no, we don't know where the money's gone. There's no accountability at all. And so we have people now in Orange County that are going to the boards and saying, we want paperwork, we want the reports showing where this money is being spent. And they're not giving it up very easy. So it's frustrating to know that they're getting the money and have no accountability for it.
And in Los Angeles, keep in mind, the schools were shut down for 18 months. So you got all this money and there were no kids in school. So where did that money go?
Is there any group specifically investigating that now in Los Angeles?
Yeah, so there's different lawsuits going on. The Children's Health Defense and PERC are really the ones leading the charge on the lawsuits. So definitely there are groups that you should follow. But yeah, they've been doing the heavy lifting, pretty much those two organizations. And then there's others, but they're the ones who filed the majority of the lawsuits.
Okay, well, I want to shift topics a little bit into something that I know is on everybody's minds right now, which is the mask mandate. And we'll get to the other mandate in a little bit, but the mask mandate has been in the news recently a lot because we're starting to see even the CDC pivoting a little on school masking. We were supposed to hear from Newsom today. I haven't seen anything yet, but I'm curious kind of what can somebody who is mayor in Los Angeles do as far as the masking, particularly as it affects children in school?
Yeah, I would do an executive order in the first 5 minutes. I mean, and that would be the end of it right there. I personally am not a big fan of the executive orders because that's what they used against us. So you know, it could be a double-edged sword. But so what I would do is I would basically say, I'm doing this, I'm ending the madness, and then I'm going to require the county, the city, and the state, I want you to justify that executive order. What were the facts that you used for this? You know, you said that, you know, in the case of the county, you shut down churches, and one church in particular, Grace Central, they sued you and you lost that because you violated their rights. So you and the city were doing things like liquor stores, pot dispensaries, etc. They can be open, but you know, the small mom and pop business, they had to be closed. Your Hollywood friends, they could have services, but everyone else couldn't. The big box stores, they could be open, you know, with people, you know, right next to each other and all of that. Again, small businesses, restaurants, all of that. You seem to have a particular problem with restaurants. You destroyed them. You also did these mandates, but you carved out all of these exemptions for people who donated funds to you. Like, for instance, the prisoners union. They don't have a mandate. Every other union does, but the prisoners union doesn't. Why? Because they gave the bulk of the money to Newsom to defend against a recall. How is, again, this is not following science. This is politics. And if you did violate people's civil rights, which it's demonstrably proven that that's what they did, you need to compensate people. So that's why I'm doing this executive order, because it should never have been allowed to begin with.
And that would prevent, well, obviously an executive order is temporary to your term.
Correct.
So
Correct.
what can we do that will prevent something like that from happening again? Because part of what we're frustrated with as parents is seeing these loopholes constantly, like, well, for now, but if the next wave comes, and the children have always been the lowest risk, and yet have always been the last to have their mandates and their rules, restrictions lifted. So we're just kind of looking at not trusting anything that's happening now. It sounds like good news, but if it can be easily turned around on us again, then
yeah, I mean, we have a constitution, but what's sad is, and this is something I've noticed that comes from both the left and the right, is that or rights are violated. It's a clear violation of the Constitution, but these people are allowed to do this, and then we have to go to court to overturn it. No, the government has to be the one to go to court to say why they have the right to violate our rights. That's how it should be. So I would say that the answer to your question is we need to really kind of beef up the state constitution, and maybe even come up with some kind of document for Los Angeles County or Los Angeles, because they keep doing it. It's like the law says this, they violate it, and then we're the ones who have to file a lawsuit to overturn them. Why is the burden always on the people? The way the Constitution works is the burden's supposed to be on the government. So we're not following the way things are supposed to work. And that's pretty sad, because we're seeing it over and over again. And even just more basic than that, they have these mandates, and then we catch them violating their own mandates, and they don't even care. That by itself should invalidate the entire mandate in law right there.
That's something we were kind of joking around on Twitter with a couple of other LA-based groups is, what can we do to prevent this from ever happening again? And we suggested the idea that if you're an unelected official, you're immediately forced to resign if you're caught violating your mandates.
I absolutely, there should be something like that. I like that's a very good idea. I mean, because again, and they have no shame. They're taking selfies, and they don't even care. In the case of Gavin, yeah. And in the case of Gavin Newsom, what is egregious about him, and people say it's not even, I tell people it's not even a political thing, because I feel the same way about Republican Governor Mike DeWine, and he did the same kind of thing. It's, you have one standard, you impose these mandates, and then you're violating. So Gavin Newsom, he shut down schools, but his kids, in-person instruction, no break. He shut down all these businesses, but he exempted his own business. Again, that in itself should invalidate everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And on a related note, obviously, Los Angeles is in a unique position with the vaccine mandates for the students as well. Luckily, in Orange County, we're not facing that. But for those LA parents who are, I know many of them have been looking at alternative education options and homeschooling. Can you describe a little bit about, does that affect private schools, charter schools, and how can those parents fight back on that?
Yeah, it's so right now there are lawsuits right now. I think the truth of the matter is the reason why they pushed back enforcing the mandate to the fall is because they were going to lose 36,000 students. That's really, and they knew those parents were serious. So what's going to happen?
Like, what is that percentage wise of their total student population?
It's significant. I mean, so if they're dipping below 400,000, I mean, and then they lose 36,000, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen is two things. Either they're going to quietly withdraw it and say there will be no mandates. So it's looking more and more like that because of, again, what happened in San Francisco with 3 board members, and you're hearing them talk about this across the country. I think that's more likely. Or what's going to happen is, sadly, what you've already mentioned, is parents are not going to comply with that. So they're going to pull their kids out. They're going to move out of LA, move out of the state. And again, this is across the board. They're just not going to do that because we can all read the data ourselves. This is not, as you mentioned, this is what's been so disturbing and perplexing about this whole thing, that kids, they're not, at risk from COVID, and they also don't spread it. What is this fixation on kids? And it is truly like a form of child abuse, what they're doing. And that's why it's also, looking at, I always wondered, why don't you just open the schools? Because if you know what's been going on around the world, there's some places like Sweden and all of that, they weren't doing this madness. And they said very simply, because we're looking at the data. That's it. And that's a left-wing country. But notice how the media quickly moved away reporting from, that country and others. So yeah, they're gonna, so I think what is, like I said, I believe that at the end of the day, they're just gonna quietly withdraw it because they are able to see the numbers themselves. There's enough parents that are upset about this, that this is kind of, the bridge too far for them. And if they have to have a choice between complying with the mandate or another option, they're going to choose another option. They'll just make it happen. And now, because it's been pushed to the fall, if the district doesn't, I think what's going to happen is parents are already starting to make that choice right now. I just homeschool, let me pull the kids out. I'm already seeing that already happening. They're not going to wait, because the other thing is parents are being worn down. I want to get back to normal. I want my children's life to get back to normal. I don't have time for this. This is 2 years now that we've been through this. Remember, it was only supposed to be 15 days? 2 weeks to slow the spread, and now we're 2 years. They're not going to stop.
I know some parents in Orange County had been going to their school boards with surveys to indicate, like, look, you will lose this many enrollments if you enforce these mandates.
Correct.
And some of the schools have funding that's tied to their enrollment, and some of them do not. So it seems like LA doesn't really care if people pull, because they still get all that money and they just have more administration to spend it on. So threatening to pull your kids isn't the way to get LA to budge on that.
Yeah, but it's even broader than that, because they are firing teachers. Those are union members. And then broader than that, we're firing police officers, firing firefighters. So there's going to be a lot of blowback for this, and I don't think they really recognize it. So, I mean, if you, in the case of UTLA, you're firing union members, you think they're just going to sit still and allow you to fire them? I mean, you could have revolts in unions. That's the other thing that could be happening coming down the pike. So again, they're causing a lot of chaos, and really, these are not very bright people. Let's just be honest. They're just literally making it up as they go along. There's no grand vision. And it's very obvious. Like now, they're going to relax the mandates. Why? I mean, what's it based on? They're just doing it because they're following someone else. There's no rhyme or reason for it. The bottom line is they should never have done it to begin with. So, yeah, parents are going to leave. I think that's what's happening now. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, we have another question in our chat. Says they only withdrew because the online school refused to accept us. They didn't have the room. LAUSD just voted to create 6 online schools in preparation to kick out the unvaxxed for the next fall. And I think that's the other thing too, is it's become very easy to pivot to virtual learning, which is not a substitute. It's not an
Yeah.
active substitute. So I think they're just fully ready to kick these kids out and offer them somehow even worse. Somehow it gets even worse doing it virtually.
Yeah, the virtual is a disaster. Every study that has shown the kids are not learning. The kids are tired of it, staring at a screen all day. One of the charter schools I sit on the board of, we kind of did a survey, and we found out from some parents that the majority of the kids were not even signing into the portal. So the district was saying X amount of students were in the distance learning, but it was a lie because they weren't tracking the number of signers. They were saying, hey, we're not signing on and no one's holding us accountable. We don't hear from anyone. It's like, it's a complete disaster. It's a complete disaster.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that they've made it so easy to do. And that's again, our concern is with any of these things where they say they're ending it, they always have a loophole to go back.
Right.
So somebody else mentioned LAUSD received $5 billion to implement all of the EUA protocols. If they don't enforce through 2023, they will have to pay it back. And that's something we've heard a lot about with the ESSER funds as well, as the school boards claim their hands are tied, and it's really, they won't tell you exactly how that happened, but the truth is they accepted money, and if they don't enforce, in Orange County's case, the mask mandate universally, then they lose their funding. I'm sure you've seen now that some of these school districts are standing up and passing resolutions that they won't enforce it by kicking kids out of the classroom. But it's yet to be seen, whether they're really going to follow through on the threats they've made to these school boards that they have to.
Yeah, but is that really true? I mean, if Gavin Newsom said, I'm not going to enforce the mask mandates for whatever reason, let's say, he was visited by an angel and suddenly got sense. I mean, does anyone really believe that they would take back the funding? No, they wouldn't.
Yeah. You have to call the bluff. I think that's where a lot of parents are right now, is that
they wouldn't.
We've been going to these board meetings for months and months, and
Yeah.
it's always the same excuses.
Correct.
And that goes back to your point as well about corruption. And I'm sure it's 10 times worse in LA than it even is here, but it's something where, we're looking right now to recruit people to run for school boards. And it's incredible how you think of school boards as being such a petty, low power position. But the teachers unions are right in there funding them. And it's very interesting how quickly you can be corrupted on a very so-called low power position. They certainly know what they're doing. And if parents are not there representing themselves, then it's going to be exclusively, voting based on teachers unions.
Yes, it's huge. And also in Los Angeles, the school board has been used as really kind of the launching board for higher office. They go from school board to city council to Sacramento. It is and as I showed you, the audience with the numbers, I mean, these are huge budgets. I mean, again, the budget is twice the size of the city of Los Angeles. So you have a lot of power. You can make a lot of change. So yeah, definitely. I always encourage people to do that, but I think just more fundamentally in changing the system, because again, we've been fighting this war a long time. We have to get back, make it even simpler. The money has to follow the child. We just need to break up everything. That's the only way to do it.
Did you have any other questions?
No, I don't.
I have one more. Oh, let's see. We're getting some more questions here virtually. Somebody asked, what are the qualification requirements to run for school board? So I'm not sure if that varies since you ran in LA, but we might be able to answer that as well. Do you have any perspectives about what that was like when you ran?
No, I mean, one of the things that they look at is if you're a parent, if you're a teacher, those are obviously the best qualifications. I would say also if you're in business and you hire, I would say that would be another, but that it's really that basic. People want to know that you have the passion. They want to know the reasoning. What's the cause? That's really what they want to know. And you have to also speak to, again, we've been fighting this war a long time. How are you going to be different? And how are you not going to be corrupted by the machine? Because You know, if you get endorsed by UTLA, we know you're one of the corrupted. If you don't, they'll put a ton of cash to try to defeat you. So yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we're actually running an event on March 12th. That is a school board candidate boot camp. So to the person who asked that question, you're welcome to come and learn more about
Absolutely.
that. Because we want the average parent to feel capable and confident in running, because I mean, from our perspective, they're truly not any smarter than us. They're truly
That's
not any more qualified than us. So it's like, if they can
that's
get
for
there,
sure.
yeah. So if they can get there and make those decisions, why can't it be us? You know,
And there's no
we're able
better,
to.
I was going to say, there's no better proof of that than just watching a school board meeting. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we also have some really good resources as well for parents to learn how the consent agendas work, and the fact that a lot of this stuff is just they don't really position it so that you're finding out about it. They'll put it all the way at the end at 10 o'clock at
Right.
night. They're doing the consent agenda that is paying for a contract for some curriculum you're not going to like. You know,
Correct.
you really have to dig through. And one thing that Michelle and I have talked about is, as we're able to endorse school board candidates, and anybody we would endorse, we would want to say, you need to be focused on transparency. These websites,
Correct.
I mean, some of our school boards don't even live stream. A lot of
Correct.
them do, but some of them still don't. They don't have any video recording. There's no accountability for what has happened if you missed that meeting. And it's hard as a parent, or especially as a working parent. These school board meetings happen around dinner and bedtime. It's just really
Right.
hard to get there. So as far as qualification requirements, as far as I know, you have to, I think, collect signatures to qualify to file. And then if you don't collect enough signatures, or I guess you can do it another way, it's just, I think you pay a filing fee. But there's nobody that's going to be looking at your background at the registrar's office to make sure you qualify. I mean, anybody who's 18 years old, is a resident in that district, is qualified to run legally. But yeah, I think you're right. I think if you can really ride this tide that's happening and this momentum, as we're starting to see parents treated as a demographic that deserves a little bit of catering for once. It's something that you can go door to door, and I think your neighbors will agree that probably the less qualified you are, the better at this point. I don't think we want any more PhDs being involved in this. They tend to make the worst decisions.
Career politicians. Yeah, we don't want that.
Yeah. Let's see, what else do we have? She says, Mike Feuer is also running for mayor as city attorney. Can you question his lack of response to act against the illegal actions of LAUSD during his campaign? So I guess, is he one of the people that would be in contention with you for this?
He's one of the candidates in the race, but he's not a top tier candidate. In the case of Mike Fury, there are a number of problems. One is he's been in office for 30 years. I remember when I first moved here, he was getting elected. And here he is, he's still there. And I bet if you go to anybody in his district and ask him, what has he done in those 30 years? No one could answer that question. The other thing is, we had mentioned about corruption. Even though he's the city attorney, he got entangled in some kind of corruption thing with the FBI. So again, that's kind of a no-go. And also, he's very partisan. He's not really focused on the rights of average Los Angelenos. It's all these kind of what I would consider fringe positions. Why doesn't he file a lawsuit against LA Unified? That's something he could do. Why don't you do that? Fight for the parents, fight for the kids. I mean, again, it's always, protecting the machine. So no, he's 30 years. He's the candidate who's been in office the longest, who's running for mayor. And he actually made his attention before everyone else. And he's not a top tier candidate.
Okay, interesting. Well, the only other, let's see. So my other question would just be kind of, I know you have experience with charter schools, and that's something that people are just now learning about. A lot of people didn't even know they existed, or how to take advantage of them. So I was wondering if you could just kind of explain an overview what a charter school is, how it works, and how they're affected by these mandates. If a city or a state mandates something, charter schools receive funding. So do they have to follow them, or can they act more outside of that scope?
Yeah, I mean, even that opening statement is kind of disturbing, that charter schools have been around for 20 years and lots of parents don't even know about them and don't know what they are and they exist. And I put the blame squarely at the feet of the whole charter school movement, because that's unacceptable. So charter schools are public schools. What's different is they have their own management. They're also, which is also kind of a problem, is they have to be authorized by the district. So a charter school in Los Angeles has to be authorized by LA Unified, which I don't know why people don't see that as a conflict of interest, because LA Unified is always trying to destroy charter schools. I don't, again, the games that are being played. So to your question about, do they have to follow the directives in terms of the mandates, the answer is yes, they do. They could try to buck the system, but then there's all kinds of things that both the city, LA Unified, and the state could do to deny funds, because again, they are a public school. It's just their management isn't LA Unified. It is whoever, the individual management of that school. And there are charter schools that are not for profit, and there are also for-profit charter schools. And what I always tell people is you need to assess them all. And you might be lucky. You might have a public school that actually does work, because again, you have a great principal, great teachers, what have you. And you could have a charter school that is absolutely dismal because they don't. Of course, the media will always try to highlight those, of course, but yeah, I think it's an option. The reason that they were started 20 years ago was to be an option. Along with magnet schools. I don't know if people remember that. So these were just all kinds of different options. And what it has become extremely political, and the unions have taken this position, even though charter schools can be unionized if the management wants to. Of course, most charter schools don't want to do that. That's the whole reason they want to be separate. But there have been charter schools that have unionized. Does a union stop their attacks? Of course not. In fact, unions have also created their own charter schools. So there's all of these games being played. But yeah, charter schools are still, they have to walk a fine line, because the other thing that can happen is they could lose their charter. That's the other thing that can happen to them. So, yeah. But again, we need something that is not tied to the machine to give the power back to the parents in the community.
I didn't realize that. That's actually really interesting that the board that approves it is approving their own competition. And
that's exactly right.
They're not going to want to do that. So I'm taking in that new information. So what do parents do about that? Like, who would you even argue with if you want to get that control to somebody else to get those approvals?
You have two options. If the LA Unified wanted to play games with your charter school, you could petition, you can go down there and all of that. And, depending on that in itself could be very effective. You could petition your actual school board member, and they could change their mind. That's one option. Another is if you, whether you're creating a new charter school or you want to move out of LA Unified, you can go to the county of Los Angeles and charter the school with the county instead of LA Unified. So that's another route that you have. And it actually is done pretty frequently. So that's another. So you're outside of the whole LA Unified madness. And you have, the schools that do that, they do have a little bit more freedom. But again, you're a public school.
Right, because you receive that funding. That's something that's interesting as well. We have a lot of parents who homeschool that are concerned, even with the school choice initiative. If you receive money and you apply it towards a homeschool academy or something like that, you're essentially giving up that freedom you currently have with homeschool. And then once you accept that money, you know, you're tied to whatever they tell you to do, or you're reliant on that. It's kind of a tricky situation for homeschoolers that, you know,
And
want
they,
public
and,
funds.
yeah, and they have every right to be concerned, because Sacramento has point blank said that that's one of the things that they're thinking of. So as more parents opt for homeschooling, before they used to kind of demonize the homeschool community, they're right wingers and all of this, all the names, whatever. But now that it's across the board again, across the political spectrum, and all kinds of parents. So now, as more people opt for that, they will be passing legislation. There's no doubt about it. That's why ultimately our goal has to be school choice, so that we can just bypass all of this madness. Because, this is another thing, another tactic really to wear parents down. You have to fight this, and then you have to fight this, and then fight this initiative, and fight this bill. It never ends. They won't stop. So school choice would cut all this out, and you'd have the same options as wealthy parents. You could just bypass everything, send your child wherever you want. So yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard elected officials that say that they're looking at regulating the homeschool community.
Mm.
Once you hear that, yeah, prepare to fight or run.
That's really scary, because that is the one place that currently, as you mentioned, even with charter schools, they have to walk a fine line. And we have a surprising number of people in private schools that have come to us and said, we don't like what they're, now with them, it's a little bit easier because they have the ability to take their money and walk away, and the private schools are more willing to listen to them.
Correct.
But it's even still a lot of the things that we're concerned about with Moms for Liberty is related to the curriculum and some of the ideologies and things that are being taught in the schools, at a very, very early age, and a lot of age inappropriate stuff. So it's concerning that they could suddenly come to homeschoolers and say, you have to show that your child learned, this curriculum, that's the whole reason you're homeschooling.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting. Yeah, I definitely have seen a lot of increase in interest in charter schools, but it's good for people to realize that it doesn't mean you're out of this fight. It means you need to double down even more, because you want that autonomy. And these charter schools are not easy to get into. In Orange County, we have some that have a wait list of like 1,000 people.
Correct. Yes. Same in LA. Yeah.
And that's something too, is as you look at school choice and these charters, how easy is it for, let's say, a group of parents to go and start their own charter? I mean, do they need somebody who's got like a PhD in education or something? Because is this something reasonable for an LA parent group, just a couple of moms and dads to start their own?
You can do it. Definitely. You absolutely can. But again, you're under the thumb of LA Unified. So if you do it in Los Angeles. Now, Orange County, it seems to be much better. Or as I mentioned, if you bypass LA Unified and go to be chartered with LA County, okay, that's better. But in the case of the mandates, you had the city and the county with the mandates. So if that was an issue, you still couldn't escape. Again, we need to have the kind of freedom, educational freedom for parents. That's the only way that's going to end it, because there is tremendous amounts of money. I mean, that's, CTA, as we know, biggest donor to one of the major parties. Well, is it any wonder they do everything that union says? Yeah.
No, absolutely. And just to wrap things up a little bit, I was reading an article today out of the LA Times where they polled parents to grade their own public schools. I don't know if you saw that one, but it wasn't pretty. It said statewide, 35% of voters gave their school an A or a B. Percentage in Los Angeles was actually 24%. And the vast majority were D's and F's. There wasn't a lot of C's. It was a lot of D's and F's. And actually in Orange County, the D's and F's were 14%, but in LA County, it was 27%. And even then I find those numbers questionable, but it's truly come to the point where parents have woken up. And I think in some ways, COVID has been a bright spot of having to do all this virtual schooling as parents for the first time really saw what was going on
Correct.
and started to get very involved. I'm sure nobody was attending these school board meetings and these numbers before COVID.
Correct.
It's something that I truly inspired to see the number of parents who are coming out. And I just hope we can rally around our allies in this fight and really focus. Like I said, we focus on all levels of government. And if that means a mayor in LA can help turn the tide in LA, that helps everybody, right?
Correct.
So it's
Absolutely.
something where we have to really focus on school choice and people who understand and advocate for the same rights that we're talking about for parental rights and even the fact that children are being denied an in-person education. That's in violation of the California Constitution. So as you mentioned as well, some of this has to come through lawsuits. And I think talking about lawsuits that set precedent and potentially constitutional amendments and stuff is going to be really important long-term strategy for us, because as you've mentioned, way back into 1999, these issues were there. We've done research reading, and it's gone back to the 80s and 90s even further.
Yep.
It's just something that has been brewing for so long, and it's not going to be a quick fix.
Correct.
But we have a lot of marathon runners here, so we're really excited to just take the momentum. And I was going to mention as well how you were talking about the statistics of all of the San Francisco board that now has had a recall, or the trucker who ran $100 campaign. We've even seen that with school boards in this last election.
Yep.
Not only did you get that big education win in Virginia for the governor, but we had Moms for Liberty chapters that helped flip seats. And last I saw, I think it was like 48 seats that were flipped.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And this was an off year election. I think these seats were in Ohio, Virginia, New Jersey, and I think maybe Pennsylvania. But that's what we're hoping to see this November as well, is Moms for Liberty was started in January last year. So it's only been around for about 12, 13 months. And, our chapter has only been around since like October. We're already seeing such incredible momentum. And as we look to train school board candidates and then hopefully be able to endorse them, there's potential that we could start flipping these boards this year. There's some of them where we have 3 out of 5 up. So you could get a majority this November, but between 22 and 24, you're certainly able to get majorities on all of these boards. I was disappointed to see that I believe the filing deadline for LAUSD has already passed. I believe you guys, our filing deadline for school boards is not until August. So we were kind of surprised to realize that it had already passed in LA, and those parents are going to be facing an uphill battle unless they do some sort of recall. So very important for people to be educated and aware of how all the politics of that filing and everything works, because it's too late for them to run for school board. But if they're able to help somebody like you and in another position of power that can really advocate for us as parents and for our kids and our education system, that's what we're looking to do, is just push back in a united way and find our allies.
Yeah, and I'll offer this as well, because I used to do training back in the past for candidates running, just some of the things that we touched upon, knowing when Los Angeles, the filing was February 12th. So, if candidates are running, there's I'd say there's kind of the political checklist, there's the emotional checklist, spiritual checklist of things that you just need to be ready for. We have the filing, you have signatures that you have to gather. You have to understand that you're going to be in a spotlight. Your family needs to be on board. You need to, there's all of these things that you have to take into account. It's not simply, oh, I'm running for office. That's great. But we don't want to have a situation where you go through the process and then you're sitting in your car. And it's like, why the hell did I do this? You never want to be in that position. You want to be fearless and get to the end so that you can do the work that you want to do.
We have one more in the Q&A box. She says, we have medical freedom candidates running for all seats up for election. I'm not sure if she means LA Unified. Let's see, we also have candidates for supervisor as well. Yeah, that's fantastic. I think people have to get the word out about these candidates and I think a lot of it truthfully will come down to single issue voters this time.
Mhm.
And that's fine. And we don't have to agree on everything.
Correct.
You know, this has been something that has united parents across all other boundaries.
Correct.
And that's a demographic that's never been given attention before. So yeah,
Mhm.
Candy, if you wanna email me, my email's on everything. Just look up Moms for Liberty Orange County. I'd love to check out who those people are. And so we can let all the other people that we know in LA say, hey, these are people you need to check out, because this
Right.
could be your avenue out of this mess. So
Correct.
thank you for mentioning that to me. LAUSD seats and supervisor. Yes, please email me those names. I would really appreciate that. We want to get to know who's out there fighting this battle with us.
Mhm.
So I think those are all the questions that we have answered. Let's see, that's all of them. I'll give you a chance to close out, Austin, and just kind of wrap things up if you have anything else you'd like to add.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me and, hosting this virtual town hall, and definitely make some of the stats, kind of available to people, because, most people don't realize some of these numbers. It kind of completely, goes in the face of what you think the reality was. And it's like, wait a minute, I didn't know that. So absolutely, again, I view this as an opportunity for a game changer race by tapping in, parents, again, that I consider kind of the new sleeping giant in politics. So if you definitely go to the website, if you want to help my campaign, definitely donate. Any amount is welcome. Like the Facebook page, refer friends and colleagues. We'll continue to build out the website as well. But yeah, this is just, again, I view this as service. I'm kind of going into battle again. And, it's my philosophy is you come in, you make things better than how you found it, and then you go away. That to me is how things should be. And if we had more people running for office for the right reasons, we wouldn't be in this position. We wouldn't, not just here in LA and the state, but across the country. We just need to get back to that. You're here to serve the people, and you're not here to enrich yourself. If you want to do that, there's all kinds of industries. If that's all you care about, you can go into those. But we have real issues. So definitely feel free to also, if you have any further questions or you want to reach out to me, you can do so directly through my website as well. And again, just thank you everyone for attending. And I hope I answered all the questions and hopefully inspire you. We can do this. And your organization is a testament to that.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, we have some people that want to see the PowerPoint. So if you can send that over to me, or just even screenshots of the statistics, just those slides.
Sure.
I want to get that information out there. Too many people don't even know just the starting data of what's going on in there. So, but yeah, and we'll definitely, let's see, that one's answered. Okay. Well, we really appreciated you coming out here today, Austin. And I know it was a little bit tight because you were also at that rally in Hollywood. So we really appreciate you coming
No
out
problem.
and answering our questions. Anything else for you, Michelle?
No, thank you, Austin, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for partnering with Moms for Liberty on this. We're here as parents to fight for education. And when I saw your background, I was like, okay, we want to hear what you know. So thank you so much for sharing your background and your experience and information. And we'll be sure to forward this webinar town hall to as many people as we can so they can learn from you as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, you have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.